Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. I'm very excited. We will talk to Steve Matthews. He's VP Executive Producer. There he is of drama development at HBO Europe. Hello, Steve. Thank you very much for being here.
Hello there. Thank you for inviting me.
Steve, you've been involved in quite a number of the HBO Europe productions. I believe that you've been that you've been with HBO Europe from the start, and you have, in starting with a show like Burning Bush, or lately Before in Us, or Gusta, and two shows that Foodie Love and The Sleepers that we are going to talk in more detail about. You have commissioned a wide range of different shows in the 21 different territories that HBO Europe is present in, and a lot of these shows have won a lot of awards, have been talked about. When you look at these, or when you think of these different shows in the different cultures that they are commissioned in, are there common factors that are important for you when commissioning a show or when looking at a new project?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think that probably for us, writing is very important with everybody, but it seems to be particularly important for us. I wish I could take credit for Burning Bush, but I actually joined in 2014, so they just finished that. That's one of the reasons that I joined. But the thing about how we started was at the very beginning of all of this. It was really only these four little territories that we were working in: Poland, Hungary, Romania, and Czech. HBO Europe, as it was then, was sort of a little cable company, a historical anomaly to some extent, and we've grown enormously since then. But what was exciting back in those days was this, slightly frontier feel before this amazing international revolution has taken place over the last few years. So what happens out there in those countries where we're incredibly proud of a lot of the work that we did, but you're looking at territories where perhaps writers don't quite have the same amount of experience that you might find in Nordic or Germany or the UK, where the infrastructure hasn't quite been there. So it became slightly different. And my boss, Anthony Root, I like to think quite cleverly hired myself and my colleague, Jonathan Young, who were really producers, were really development executives. This is my first broadcast job I've ever had. So whereas in, a bigger country, like where you guys are, there are big production companies and experienced writers, and they come to you and it's more of a commissioning editor game. Whereas out there in Central Europe, there was a kind of desire for us to get our hands dirty and get deep into the development and develop very closely ourselves. And along with that came, they started before my time doing a number of formats, very intelligently did in treatment, I think, in all four of those territories, which worked extremely well. But from the very start, we wanted to work with local writers. We wanted to dig our hands into the local soil and find writers who had something to say about their own countries. So I think that the answer to your question, the unifying thing across that we've carried forward into these bigger countries and how we've expanded has been a real intention to devolve the creativity down to the soil and the culture of the local territories and to support writers. So I think all of our stuff, I think they've all been good scripts, I think is the answer. Writing first and foremost.
Okay, so the quality of writing, but besides that, are there any topical arenas that you are particularly interested in, or is it just the project and its originality and authenticity and the quality of writing that make you decide whether you want to do something?
Yes, the latter. I mean, I think things have changed, which I'm sure we'll talk about over those years. And I think that What was exciting in those early days was it felt like those kind of brand values you think of from HBO, was really exciting. It felt like doing something really new. Maybe that's what it felt like over there in 98, 99 when they were doing Oz and those things. But there's a delicate balance here. And this is really the core of the job that I did then, and I still do, is to find a line. You want the ideas to come from the local territories. You want writers to come with ideas and have something to say about their own societies. But as I said, perhaps there's a little bit of a lack of experience sometimes in just the cold, hard architecture of putting a script together. So I think my job has always been to find that line where I hopefully can bring some experience and support and help those writers to put a script together, to understand genre and those things. But what they want to say, who those characters are, is their side of the line. So I think that the actual answer to your question is, what we often say to writers, particularly out there in Central Europe, is that we would never. What I'm trying to say is that I think that those original HBO brand values are always built on originality and authenticity, but at the same time within a continuum of certain genre. Deadwood is just a Western. The Soprano is just a gangster show. They were just different, but they were not pieces from another planet. So, what we always say in kind of Central Europe, we're never going to do something sort of full-on Romanian new wave where nothing really happens and the camera doesn't move. We wouldn't go that far Art House, and we never would have done. But neither would we do an empty cop show that's just a dead body and some fingerprints. Always looking for that balance in the middle. Probably a genre engine, something universal that everyone can access, but keeping room in there for the writer's voice and that authenticity you mentioned. And that's the game. That's what I do all day, every day, is trying to get the right balance in those conversations.
I think that's fantastic, and I think what you mentioned, that you're looking at the experience of different writers and how to help them in the different territories. It's also a great service to the creative landscape in the territories. So how do you do that as a team from a more practical perspective? You're based in London, and I assume that you have team members who work with you. Do you have someone in your team who speaks, like different persons who speak the local languages, or how do you work in that process? I assume the scripts will get translated. How do you find the line between where you can help and where you have to just follow, or just have the trust to make sure it's authentic and local?
Yes, and you're right. I'm a typical Brit with very poor language skills and don't speak a word of any other language. So why they hired me is a mystery to me. But this is the key point. There are not many of us. The majority of our staff is based in the local territories. And what I used to do was just lived on aeroplanes and airports. I could easily be doing 3 cities a week. Now, of course, I've spent the last 15 months in my pajamas in my bedroom. So that's a whole different kind of ballgame. The really important thing for us is to devolve as much of that trust as possible down to the local territories. So each of the countries, each of our territories has its own office, has its own head of OP, has its own development executives. So it's, the projects are coming into them. They're the first ones who are reading them. And I try very hard personally not to be the kind of Western guy in a suit who's in some way approving things. I try to float from territory to territory to provide support and help wherever I can. No, you're absolutely right. I lose 20 to 30% of the meaning of any given script in the translation process, excellent though our translations are. I lose 20 to 30%, more importantly, of the meaning of the cultural stuff. So again, this kind of comes back to where that line is between what I think I can help with and what belongs to the local territory. So the short answer to your question is, as much as we can, try to devolve the power down, the decisions down to the local territories, because we think that, for instance, an executive in Poland has a better idea of what Polish stories will resonate, particularly for a Polish audience.
And when the scripts then get to you and when you read them, are there any areas you focus on, or do you read them and just give notes based on your gut feeling? How do you do that?
That's a big question. That's a career's worth of questions. But yes, I mean, look, I think that I don't really do anything differently personally in a relationship with a writer to what I would have been doing when I was a producer, when you're out there having that close relationship supporting a writer. So to some extent, you know, if you do that job properly, then there is an important relationship of trust between the producer. And again, you know, I've got to stay out of the way because the core relationship with the Polish writer is probably somebody at the Polish team. I probably don't speak their language. But basically, I believe the very important thing is to get very deep into the idea and think about it and talk about it at an early stage. So that later, when a script is, it's not so much about whether a script is good or bad, it's more whether it's right or wrong. You know, if everybody understands the idea, then everybody's on the same page and these things don't turn into conflicts. So, you know, I think the answer to your question is, I hope I bring some experience having done lots of genre stuff in the past. And then you know, a lot of it does become instincts. A lot of it certainly does become instinct. But as I said, usually I'm focusing on the genre side of things. Usually I've done more cop shows than the writer that I'm working with, again, particularly in Central Europe. So usually it's those areas that I'm trying to bring some experience to and support.
Mm-hmm. So you mean the genre elements and structure and these sort of things?
Very often, yeah. We do a Romanian show called Ombre, where I work with a wonderful writer-director called Bogdan Marica, and we used to joke about this, that if he was allowed to do Ombre on his own, nothing would ever happen, and it would be three old gangsters sitting in a bar drinking. And if I was allowed to do Ombre on my own, it would just be car chases and shootouts. And it was a wonderful experience, actually. Somewhere in the middle, we found its own kind of voice, its own kind of relationship with genre. So usually that's the area that I'm mostly working. But what you're always trying in that relationship to be a step ahead of the writer. You're trying to understand what it is they're trying to achieve. You're trying to understand what they need to do next. It shouldn't be telling them what to do. It shouldn't be telling them what they've done right, what they've done. It should be, okay, you've done this. What about this? What about this? What about this? You're trying to open doors for them. That's the way that I look at it.
Mm-hmm. Another more general question before we talk about the two shows, Foodie Love and The Sleepers. So you mentioned already that in Central Europe you're working a lot with also less experienced writers. How do you find your ideas and properties in general? Do writers usually come to you? Do producers come to you? Would you ever, like other streamers might do, option a novel and then find talent for it? How are you on the lookout?
Yes, I mean, here again, it varies, and as we've expanded from those Central European territories into the more mature markets like the Nordics and Spain, then there, of course, you do have a more familiar commissioning environment where you have big, powerful production companies. They know what they're doing. They've got development executives. So there you do not sit back, but it's telling that our executives in Nordic and Spain are called commissioning editors rather than executive producers. It's a more kind of traditional game. So there, yes, you production companies probably come to us with properties that may well be books or writers or scripts or whatever it may be. Central Europe, again, was a little bit harder, but it was critical that we had people in the territories because these are territories where, I mean, it's changing now, but certainly 5 years ago, in some of the smaller territories we worked in, there wasn't really any such thing as a production company that was developing high-end television internally. Amazing crews, amazing production services, but not quite so much of that. So we had to go looking, and there are no agents. There's not really any system of agents, with the exception, I suppose, of Poland. So again, we had to rely rely on our guys, our development executives in the territories, to go out and find writers and work up ideas. I mean, I think we talked the other day, one example, we did one show in Croatia. And that one, I was given the task, Steve, go off to Zagreb and put a slate together. And at that point, at the beginning, there was no development executive there. So there was me and my suitcase turn up in Zagreb, and where are the writers? And what we did with the amazing support of the local office was put together a writing competition, which was amazing, a pilot competition for many of the Balkan countries. And we got lots and lots of applications, and these scripts came in, and we picked one, and we made it, which was fantastic. And that's one of the joys of this job, really, is that the guy who was a show called Success, and the guy who won the competition, I'm not saying he was a kid, he was 14, had done some writing before, but it was certainly his first time to be writing at the high-end television level. And then we took it and we worked with him and we developed it, and we ended up with an Oscar-winning director, Danis Tanovic, directing it. And that was a joy. I can't think of anywhere else somebody would let me work with a competition-winning writer and hook him up with an Oscar-winning director and make it. It was amazing. So yeah, it's exciting.
Well, besides you traveling a lot, it does sound as if you're really well organized as a company to maintain this network of being close to talent while also being very centralized. Sounds like a huge job. Yeah, why don't we look at our first little snippet, and maybe based on the two examples, you can also tell us a bit more how hands-on or hands-off you are throughout the production process. We will start with Foodie Love. Foodie Love and Sleepers will also air on Arte here sometime soon.
Y ambos dejaremos ver al otro por una rendija pequeña como somos de verdad. Y entonces nos asustaremos y volveremos a bromear y a no decir nada y...
No sé por qué me molesto en esto. Pasará lo de cada vez. Jiji, jaja. Un relámpago de algo real y jiji, jaja de nuevo. Bueno, pues vale, pues quizá mejor así.
Comer, bromear, no decir nada. Mucho mejor así.
Depuis le jour où je vous aime, mon cœur est sans espoir. Malgré votre sourire même, tout est là, triste et noir. Pourtant un jour dans un baiser, vous m'avez promis de m'aimer. Il ne faut pas briser un rêve.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Para comenzar, una mariposa hecha con infusión de romero y zumo de zanahoria morada, que es la que le da este color tan particular. Para degustarla, les recomendamos cada ala por separado o bien cerrándola como si de un libro se tratase.
Muchas gracias.
De nada.
A veces pienso cuando sonríe o cuando intenta sonreír, como que veo a un niño asustado o a un adulto inmaduro asustado.
I can really recommend to watch the show. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, we're talking here about a Spanish show. Can you tell us a bit on how this show came to you and how you found it and how you then collaborated with the writer-director?
Yes, and in some ways, apart from the good news about Arte, the reason that we chose these two shows to talk about is that to some extent the opposite ends of the spectrum. So this comes in from Isabelle Coixet, an amazing, very accomplished, award-winning filmmaker. And these were in the early days when we were setting up in Spain. As I said, a territory where big production companies are likely to come to you. So, we've got Alex de la Iglesia coming in with 30 Coins, and we had Isabelle came in with Foodie Love. And, with a piece of talent of that ability, you're not going to do that much with it. But it was clearly a no-brainer, because not only is Isabelle an amazing filmmaker, but she's also a big foodie and a blogger about food and so on. And I could tell you all afternoon some of the amazing places that she took us to eat in Madrid and Barcelona. But to me, I mean, look, you're going to do it because it's Isabelle Coixet and it's great. But it's such a beautiful, simple, clever little idea that as soon as I read it, I think I would have wanted to do it whoever it had come in from. It's just like this little beautiful piece of jewelry. You just look at it and you go, I know exactly how this is going to work. And without giving anything away, it's just very simply 8 half hours or 35 minutes or whatever they are, a single love story told across an arc, each episode being one slice in time, and each one of those slices in time being one meal. Such a beautiful, simple idea. And it just appealed because it immediately worked the way that my brain works, which is like, okay, you've got a pattern, then it's like a Rubik's Cube. Well, then you can do that and you click it and you can click it and then you can vary it. And that's what I love about it. So it's, again, without giving any spoilers, the first episode is a date and then there's another meal, but then we start to vary it. So there's one episode which is about food, but they're not actually together. And then there's breakfast after their first night together, and it was just such a beautiful, simple little idea that you could see how it would work out. So I think that I got on very well with Isabelle from the start. I got what she wanted to do. These are little plays. These are broadly a dialogue piece. 2 people turn up, sit at the table. And what was brilliant about that for a writer, for that kind of playwright, is they can talk about anything at that table. I've rarely worked on a project where we did so little to the script to some extent, because they were just a place for Isabelle to talk about whatever what she wanted to talk about today. And she covers a lot of topics. And I swear she woke up in the morning, watched something on the news, got annoyed by it and put it into the script she was writing. As that rawness, to use a cookery analogy. It was so with a project like that, with talent like that, with a project that wants to be loose within a very clear frame, you don't want to do too much of it. What I did, I think, where I think I might hopefully have been helpful in my support to Isabelle, was then to think about the love story. And there, again, my experience comes in. What is the mechanics of the love story? What are the pitfalls of the love story? Well, first of all, the famous Ross and Rachel problem. One of the great problems with a love story is you can't go for too long before they get together, and once they've got together, it's really boring, and you want to go off somewhere else. There's a reason why Romeo and Juliet never meet again after their night together. So this was an area that I think I helped Isabelle. What are you going to do? Where are they going to sleep together? How are you then going to keep that relationship under pressure? And one of the great things about this job and working with a writer when it can work is that something quite cold and mathematical and formulaic in a discussion with a writer can then open a door to something that's completely subconscious. And I mean, I'm going off topic here, but I think this is a very important thing that young writers need to understand, that the job is very much split between conscious and unconscious. There's the conscious side, the storyboard, episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, turning point 1, turning point 2, all of those things. That is machinery, that's architecture. And then there's the other side of writing, which is 3 o'clock in the morning, alone in the dark in your bedroom, waiting for that idea. I can help with the former, but I'm never there with you for the latter. So I think that was joyfulness, a conversation with Isabelle about the necessities and mathematical formulae of the love story led to this weird, strange Japanese thing, which I won't say any more about, because if you see it, you'll see what I mean. But really, Isabelle comes in, great idea. What are you going to do? A piece of advice I give young development executives is if it's good, don't give notes on it. It's something you learn over the years to not do too much, in my opinion.
Why don't we look at the next show and talk about the other steps of the process, maybe afterwards. Can we see the next snippet?
A už skoro nekouřím. Vlastně to nedělá dobře. A mě už se nechce furt courat ven. Děkuju.
Tak co to bude?
Zavolejte mi šéfa.
Cože?
Šéfa mi zavolej. Nech to na mě.
Fajn.
Nějaký problém, pánové? Hej, vy zůstanete tady.
Pojď ven.
Máš pivo, ne?
Takže tady nebyli.
No určitě ne. Jí bych si pamatoval. Ale to jako má být.
Buď jsi viděl, nebo neviděl, kdo to je, potom je ti prd.
No, tak vy to možná nevíte, ale já jsem ve spojení s poručíkem.
Lálou, z 10 víme. Co má být?
No, že by asi nebyl rád, že jsi mi takhle předevšel.
Lála se vůbec nic nedoví. To za A. Za B. Tím, že jsme tě klofli před lidma, ti krajem prdel ty debile. Teď budeš aspoň za hrdinu.
Co blbneš?
Už mě to nějak sere.
Steve, can you tell us a bit about Sleepers? What it show's about and how it got to you?
Yeah. It's a bit different, isn't it, looking at there? It's not very much like Foodie Love. We have quite a lot of range. Foodie Love's all fluffy and lovely and sweet. This is like pretty grim. I think even Zacharias, our director, should win an award for creating the ugliest bar in the history of drinking. This was completely the opposite end of the scale. This came into our wonderful OP executive Teresa in our Czech office from a friend of hers that she'd been to university with, a guy called Andre Gabriel. And Andre had never written anything. I don't think he'd written anything before, but he was essentially a historian by degree and a special advisor. He worked in politics as a spad in the Czech parliament of some description. So you couldn't get more different from Isabel. And so this was probably, this was an example of really helping a writer with less experience, because what he had was something he wanted to say about a political landscape. As you can see, it's all spies. It's set in the bridge between 88 and 89, just coming into the Velvet Revolution in then Czechoslovakia. And it's about a husband and wife pair of dissidents who escaped from the Soviet regime 10 years before in backstory. And now, as was true, there was an amnesty for people to go back just as things were thawing in the Cold War. So they go back to have a look at Prague, and then something happens, and the husband disappears, and the wife, who's the protagonist, finds herself caught up in a kind of game of spies between lots of spooky spies running around Prague. So there were, in this case, a number of more intellect-driven reasons for doing it. First of all, we started to look at this in, I suppose, 2016. So we knew that 2019 was coming. So there was a definite plan for this as a 30th anniversary piece. Secondly, I connected very well with Andre. We both loved spy thrillers. We both loved Le Carré. And we sat in a bar talking about Le Carré and Smiley's People in particular. And we were talking about how we love those books, but Central Europe, the countries that George Smiley and his enemies run around in, are kind of chessboards for the British and the Russian super spies to play a game. So we thought, what would it be like to tell a Le Carré-ish story from the point of view of one of the pawns on that chessboard? How did this feel from a local point of view? And then thirdly, the part, of course, that I can't fully understand, not really knowing Czech history and the Czech culture, is what he wanted to say about the end of the Cold War in 1989, right from the very start. I mean, I chose that clip because it's got that sense of cynicism. These old spies, they can't really be bothered. Everybody knows it's a game. Now, clearly, the cynical old spy is not anything particularly new, but what Andre really wanted to look at in a revisionist way is what really happened in 1989 and the relationship between then and now and the geopolitics that we now have in Europe. And this was his clear point. He'd been taught at school that at that time, the good guys won, the bad guys lost. It was the end of history, and that's the way it was kind of remembered in the consciousness. So I think he wanted, and I think for us the slight HBO-ness about it was to do something that challenged that and questioned that. His vision of that time is that there was no difference between it wasn't a clash between East and West or Soviet and America or capitalism and communist. It was a feeding frenzy whereby everybody knew what was coming and the old spies were about to be left out and the new capitalist guys were going to be in there to make money. And I say that very crudely because I'm not a politician and I don't really know the Czech culture very well, but he clearly had something to say. So we've got a shared love of Le Carré. I've got a clock ticking because I've got 3 years to get this made. I've got a writer who's never written before, and then he embarks on storyline and trying to write this thing, which I don't think, which is somewhat, it's a tricky genre. As you've seen some of it. It's phenomenally complicated if you really want to do those agents and double agents and dead drops and all that kind of stuff. It comes with quite a lot of complexity. Plus, he chose, interestingly and rightly, to have his protagonist not a spy specifically, not an experienced spy. She's a woman in a man's world who does not have that spy experience. So in that regard, I guess, resembles Ambler more than Le Carré. So this was a monstrously complicated thing to plot. So whereas with Isabelle Coixet, it was easy, it was encouraging, it was supporting, it was being there to help her when needed. This one was long, hard hours in a room with paper, just trying to break these stories and crack it out. And that's one of the things that I love about this job. I don't think I treat big writers and small writers differently, but some require different care. But this one was difficult to do and ultimately rewarding.
Thank you very much. So you work across all these different countries, and you mentioned Isabelle Coixet as a writer-director, and then you worked with a less experienced writer on The Sleepers. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience might be able to relate to that as well. In all these different European countries and Central European countries, the role of the director and writer tends to differ. What happens when the director comes in one of your shows? In Germany, for example, the tradition is that the director has a director's pass on the script, so the director can change quite a lot of things in a script sometimes. How do you deal with that when this important new voice joins a project?
Yeah. I mean, it is very important, and you're right. Some projects come into us with a director already attached and deeply in the development they've already done, but probably less so. It's TV. Usually, you develop it and you go and look for a director. And this is another area it varies from project to project. It is organic, and it can be challenging when you're looking for the kind of quality that we're looking for, by which I mean, if you get a script from a first-time writer, as we did in Croatia with success, and then you bring Danis Tanovic in and he's got an Oscar, you're not going to be able to, Danis Tanovic is going to do what Danis Tanovic is going to do. And that's great because, we want that added value that these terrific directors bring to us. So we're always very ambitious to bring that kind of power to a project. But you're well aware in that regard that they're not just going to shoot the script and go home. You know, of course they're not. Of course they're not. Nor should they. So they want to be deeply involved in the weave of the project itself. And in that regard, you know, there's no advice that you can give better than talk. Know what the project is before you start shooting. If you've got it right, they're on board and everybody's agreed on what it is, and there won't be a problem. Of course, a director can have a look at the script and probably do a pass with the writer, and some want to and some don't want to. By that time in the process, I know what what you're suggesting is completely right. Sometimes you work for 2 years on the script and a director comes in and wants to do something different to it, and yet that can get everybody a little bit jumpy. So, you know, I keep a close eye. By that time in the process, hopefully I know what's important and what's not important, and hopefully the relationship is good enough that I can, you know, have the conversation and we can find something that everybody is agreed on. Not a compromise, but everybody's agreed on the best version. And believe me, it's better to be doing that at the development stage than it is in the cutting room, where your options are more limited. So yeah, we're always very ambitious with directors. We want to support them as well, but we worked hard on this script. We think it's right, so we will get that balance, hopefully.
And then further on in the production process, during the shooting and the editing, how hands-on do you tend to be there? Does that depend on the project, or do you have a certain method that you're following?
It depends on the project. I think, like any executive producer, of course, very closely involved in the development. Of course, we want to be looking at the casting and all of those things. Again, not imposing anything, but with suggestions, you know, coming in from the local team. Of course, there's a little bit of an eye to international, but I think that our focus is more local than a lot of other companies. And then the shoot, you know, why would I go to the shoot? I'm too old to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and be at unit base anymore. The shoot is too fast. I don't know what, I can't speak the language that the crew is speaking. Usually it's at the start and finish. Usually I'm coming back in the post-production process. Usually that's where you're finding the story again. I always think that post-production mirrors development in quite a lot of ways. And then, yeah, sometimes for me, when I started, I was very close to everything. Now we've got a lot of projects. So some projects you're a little bit more hands-off. You just check a cut. Some I'm there in the cutting room with the guys. It really varies from project to project.
And we are nearly at the end of our panel. Some more general questions. When you then air a project, how do you measure its success? Is it how many people are watching it? Is it new subscribers? Is it numbers, or is it reviews, or is it awards, or is it a combination of these factors? What is most important to you?
Yeah, it's a surprisingly complicated question. So I suppose really the answer is yes. Although, I mean, this is not an area that I'm particularly involved with. I think this is changing all of the time. Certainly, as we're part of the new Max universe, then there's a desire for subscribers. But we've always felt that there was a balance in here between, you know, what we can get in terms of brand value and awards. All of these things are our values. Some shows that we do are probably going to be a little bit more highbrow, and the reviews and the kind of subscribers are more. Others will be a little bit more broad. So I think all of those things really is the answer. But fortunately, I'm not particularly involved in that. But it's quite a complicated question. Yeah.
Right. And so, for writers and producers or directors who want to present projects to you, how do they do that? Do they turn to the local office? Do they turn to you? Can they do everything? What sort of pitch is the ideal version? Do you want to get a script? I assume not. Or do you want to get a pitch document? Or do you have an ideal version of a project presentation?
Yeah, I think that we're quite organic and quite varied. There's no sort of particular model for what we're looking for. There's no particular times of the year or commissioning rounds or anything like that. Certainly, first instance, local office. At this time, it's Central Europe, Nordic, and Spain, and everything. You're very welcome to track me down and send me things, but I will just pass it straight on to Miguel in Spain or Christian in Stockholm or whatever it is, because they must make the decisions. And yeah, I think that. Less rather than more, for a number of reasons. I mean, often we read things that I think are kind of overdeveloped when they come in. So you get 4 scripts and you read it and you go, I wouldn't have done it that way. So I think that because I think we're quite good on development, because I think we have an opinion, but hopefully a supportive opinion on development, I think we like things earlier rather than later. Not just because, yes, because we can influence it, but influence it in a good way to help the talent team understand our needs, but also for us to understand what they're trying to do so that development project thing can work. So, earlier rather than later. I mean, very often, if we know the talent is more important in some ways. Again, this comes from the breeding that I have out of Central Europe, where the kind of writers that had what we needed, there weren't that many of them. So, you really want to talk to them to find the right idea. To some extent, the talent kind of comes first. So we're very interested in, even if it's, would you like to meet this writer? Let's talk. That's something that we would do. So yeah, less rather than more is we're very happy with.
And if someone pitches to you, are there any red flags to you, or any references that you feel you've heard so often that you would like to say to this audience? Please find another one.
I think that probably the brief, it has changed and will change and is changing, but the core of it is still the same and always will be, which is, we're looking for things that are accessible at a genre level. It's got vampires or car chases or spaceships, just as Deadwood delivers you shootouts and the sprite. You get what you want from The Wire, but that thing on the inside as well, that it's really about something. There's always that balance that we're looking for. I think that, there are certain areas, region by region, that are quite tricky. We need a very good reason to do a kind of, in terms of history, period is something you need a really good reason. You mentioned Burning Bush, and we love Burning Bush because it was a completely different angle on the Jan Palach story. It wasn't a biopic. It was actually a legal thriller that took place afterwards. So new angles on things is good, but we'll probably lean a bit more to the contemporary. We're probably leaning a little bit younger. But no, I don't think there's anything that we absolutely wouldn't do, as long as we can see that there's some kind of genre engine. The red flag, the thing that we like least, is getting something in and it says it's a thriller. We've currently set it in Prague, but don't worry, we can set it anywhere. That's the biggest red flag to us. That tells us that this hasn't come from underneath. It isn't being grown from underneath. This tells you it's been coming from the top. So yeah, that's the thing that I least like to hear, is don't worry, we can set it anywhere.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. I think this was very informative, and thank you for sharing your shows with us. As I said, I can really, really recommend them, and we all look forward to watching them on Arte in France and Germany.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't be there. I hope to come next year, but I hope everybody has a successful time. Thank you.
Thank you.